Oh, thank you very much. Okay, we got the last one, and that's glad we're all here today and got through the lines. I was talking to those ladies. They said it's one of the perks they have of where they work. They said they take turns, and they get a couple a year. They get a little cruise. They got to see a little Vigo. I thought it was pretty cool. It's kind of nice. Anyway, so we'll just pick up today a little bit of an orientation on Southampton for those not familiar, a couple things you can do with it, and a little bit about the airports. I know a lot of people have been through there already, and I appreciate your coming today. So a lot of posters about it. It's kind of a nice one. Queen Mary into Normandy. Normandy had a sad situation. It was in New York in 1942. It had gotten away out of France. And they were doing some welding on it, and there was a bunch of dry life preservers too close to the work they were doing, and they caught fire. People thought it might have been some kind of sabotage. It wasn't. But what happened is the fire got out of control. I think they had the the alarm system set up, was turned off. So they started pumping water in, and as it happened, the architect for the ship was in New York, and he went there and he said, "Don't put water in, it's going to capsize." Nobody listened to him. Yeah, that's the end of that sad story. But anyway, there's a lot of ships, of course, have gone through Southampton. So just the title of this little thing was Blighty, and that's English. How many people from England have used that? Anybody still? Yeah, still? Okay, I saw it. Yeah, as I said, my wife's half English, so I hear some of these things from her mom. She was Scouse. And anyway, it's a term they've used, and we're finally getting there. There's always the thing like go home to Blighty in the world wars. And taking a look at where we're going, just focusing on it. The Southampton, again, as many of you know, is right up here in this little narrow land there, beyond the Isle of Wight, just in the very southern part of England. A little warmer climate than you get further inland, and very convenient for coming in off the channel. And you can follow this, of course, on TV. So I just did a couple here, just showing, focusing down on it. And there we go. There's several different docks, and I looked very carefully where we come in, and I double-checked it yesterday on the court arrival, and I was happy to see the TV confirmed that today, because I don't want to give you bad information. But we've got the Horizon Cruise Terminal, different lines are using different ones. And you can see it's quite a complex system they have there, quite a few terminals in a row going up from the Queen Elizabeth to the Mayflower. But I think some people are getting picked up, aren't they? Yeah, okay, well, you probably know we've done this before, I'm sure, but I just thought it wouldn't hurt to put in a few directions. There we are again. And the terminal was fixed up a few years ago. There is parking close by. Careful to use car park. I have Siri at home, and I have an Australian accent. My wife always laughs when you go into a mall and she says car park. And that's what it is. And there you go. So if this is helpful to anybody who's getting a pickup, again, you probably have this already. I'll leave it up. This is dock gate number 10. I think it must be very well marked. Everybody have it who wants it? No? Oh, wait a minute. Okay. So again, this is the usual story with Europe. People have been there many, many years, and they found evidence of folks going back, right back to the Stone Age, probably when English Channel didn't even exist. If you've ever read, the R.L. stories about, the original cave people who lived in England, it was quite late, actually. The glaciers melted and that split off. England became an island, Britain became an island. But folks have been there for a long time. It was a natural place for the Romans to come in. And later on, the Saxons and the Normans, when they showed up, they had settlements there. They put in the Doomsday Book. And so there was some traffic out of there for a long time. In 1910, they put this tower up. Some people apparently complained at the time and said, why should we honor those people who left us? They weren't happy here. Why should we give them a monument? But they did. So by the Victorian age, this was the major port for much of the traffic going out to the rest of the empire. I mean, Liverpool, London, yeah, other places as well, of course, but a lot came out of Southampton. I thought this was kind of an interesting imperial federation of the world. It doesn't really, 1886 it doesn't really show East Africa in there. But it was kind of a fun picture with the native stereotypes and the hunter and all this stuff. Amazing what they produced. So a lot of travel came there. Southern Railway, which actually existed until the 1948 when everything was nationalized and became British Rail, which I believe now has been sold off, hasn't it? But yeah. But in any case, that was the main trip from London was on that 16 shillings, 6 pence. That's pretty expensive at that time. Must have been a very nice service. There's a lot of rail traffic going back and forth as you find through that area. So it was very heavily used, and most of those rails are gone now, actually. It's kind of sad. I was looking once from the pictures from the 1960s. They're just overgrown with grass before they pulled them out. But there still are obviously rail lines. So 1890, they have a pretty good sized pier. You go in, check in, and walk over and get on, and off you go. Pretty easy. This is rather pretty, actually. This is 1930s, and the Cunards were using it, but there's other ships. Empress of Britain was another one that was on the shuttle. A lot of stuff is going to Canada in this period. So there's another ship that's running through the 1930s. And you actually went into the 50s before it got too expensive. But there was quite a bit of activity, and these are lovely pictures, aren't they? So under George V, they built a huge dry dock. That was 1933. I don't know if it was a make-work project perhaps, but it's been very helpful for the ships later. And of course, this was a major site during the war. So First World War, a lot of prisoners coming in. Yeah. Especially at the end of the war when everything just collapsed. My wife's father talked about how he was so excited as a child when his father came back from the World War I. And he said it took him 3 months to walk home from guard duty in Lithuania when everything collapsed. Chaos. But they pulled a lot of them in. And World War II is kind of a neat picture there again of people from Canada going out for D-Day. But there was, again, this was heavily used. Well, of course, if it's heavily used, what are the Jerry's likely to do? Yeah, this was close into France, and it was a major port, and therefore it was a nice prime target. So when the Battle of Britain, they switched from bombing airfields to bombing cities, which was a mistake. They started hitting Southampton pretty hard, and 57 times they bombed it. They did a huge amount of damage in the dock areas and to the residential areas. They had more than any other, higher loss of housing stock than any other city in Britain. And then it hit again somewhat in 1944 with the second time when they had the V-1 rockets. So the city was pretty well beat up along the way. It's pretty sad. I was reading last night about it. They talked about how one guy who was killed was actually somebody who survived the Titanic. Yeah. So in any case, after the war, they developed a plan to rebuild the city, and they said, let's do it fast, like as quick as we can, and that meant using concrete. And I think this was pretty typical in Europe as a whole, and then the Americans picked up, oh, this is European architecture, we can do this. So this, yeah, I know, it took decades to get out of it. So we have this kind of thing that looked like the dorms I had in college, actually. It's, yeah. They had this heavy stuff they were building, and it's a lot of the inner city and quite a few of the suburban rings kind of look like this. But yeah, so they did rebuild the ports though, and in 1950 they opened a major terminal here, and then also it's when container ships started coming in the late 50s. They were ready for that, and they built it. So unlike some areas that in America, we call them rust belts, cities that were left behind. They were smart at Southampton, and they were able to see the trains were going down, but the cruise ships were coming up and containers and things, and they were able to make a transition over into that to keep the business. And I think that's really what kept the city going to a large extent. And fortunately, they did not knock down the old parts of the city. Those mostly survived okay. So you have a lot of ancient city walls here, I think more really any place else in Britain. So a lot of these medieval ones were built when they got tired. They had 5 French pirate raids in a row, and that was enough for them. So it's quite a bit of it has remained over the years. You can walk on the top there in places. And then, of course, later on, other things were built in here. So this was the Tudor period, Henry VIII, Elizabeth I. You had some of these additional work going on. They were ready to use them in the Second World. Sure, why not? It's amazing. I always find as an American how much has survived in Britain. It's wonderful to see. If anybody's been up in York, they have that wonderful Hanseatic League house there. And what really impressed me was they had a huge chest in it, and they said this is where they kept their records, and they were prepared when there was a fire. They just had 6 big guys come out and grab the handles and lift it and walk it out, and save all their records. I mean, that's smart. Well, World War II, another reason the Germans hit it was because they were building Spitfire planes there. So they have a nice museum for it, but unfortunately it's closed when we come in tomorrow. If anyone is staying and interested in aircraft, that would be something worth seeing. And an art gallery, which, lovely, also closed. Sorry. Not my choice. Anyway, that's what you got. So I don't know if anybody's staying over long enough. You'd be interested. Yes? No? No, it's there. But a nice Sea City Museum, and that is open. And a lot of people who were on that ship had come out of this city as working sailors, so they have quite a few monuments around the city to that. And in fact, there's even a little walking tour you can take. It takes a little over an hour, and you can go from the museum and hit 3 of the memorials. There's quite a few around. There's a nice one in Carnegie Hall in New York to the musicians on the plaque on the wall. Engineering officers, postal workers, musicians. So I'll give you a picture of where these things are. See the Tudor house right there. It's just down from the port where the star is. Another house there, and plane museum, and then further over the fortifications and the more medieval stuff, and then the Engineers Memorial and the Major City Museum, Titanic Museum. So again, it's all pretty walkable in that area. It's not a big area. So if, like me, you're leaving right away, several choices. A lot of people have buses out of here, off the ship, yeah. Quite a few, I see. So if anybody's going on their own, I'm sure you've looked this up too, but there's a bus station and a railway station. They mentioned it, in fact, on one of those TV videos. You can walk there either way, and there are taxis too if you have luggage. Heathrow is a pretty direct way, but unfortunately, trains you have to change at one point. So it depends what your flights are and how you feel about that. And as far as the airports themselves go, if anyone isn't familiar, I thought it'd be helpful to put this in. You don't hear about Terminal 1. I had to look up, get curious. Air Canada and things like that are Terminal 2, Terminal 3 American. Again, always check, things can change at the last minute. And you have international carriers, other ones 5 is British Airways. And then you can connect from one to another pretty easily. Any questions or anything to add on that? Anybody taken Heathrow one time or another? Anything to add to it? Any thoughts about it? Is it user-friendly?
No.
No. Okay, what should we know? Because I'm going to hit it tomorrow, first time in years. What should we know?
Give yourself a lot of extra time. The signage, I get confused. Okay, it's when it says, go to this direction. Maybe I'm not that smart.
It can happen in a lot of airports, believe me. And you wandered around quite a few looking for things that are just over there and it looks like it's over here.
And if you miss your flight, they send you back. Nothing.
Don't miss your flight. Okay. Okay. Yes.
They have color-coded lines that
Okay.
we follow now.
Color-coded lines, that should help.
Yes.
Thank you.
Very much.
Yeah. Like the blue line we had in Madeira.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Anything that helps. Great. Anything else? Yes.
Wheelchair assistance is very important.
Oh, it is? Okay, poor wheelchair assistance, so allow time for that. Okay, yeah. Yeah, I don't know, I should mention, I get an airline blog, and the writer talks about sometimes on planes you have Jesus flights, and what it is all people who legitimately don't need help, but they want it anyway. And then when they get off, I can walk. And it's infuriating for the people who need it. All of a sudden, the facilities aren't there. Yeah, question, comment? Okay. Yes. Yes, sir. I'm sorry. Okay, it tells you which terminal in Heathrow to go to on the site. Okay. Okay, all the information you can get. We all know this, but it's great. Thank you very much. And the more because it can change. You're right. Yes, sir. Good. Thank you. I know Australia doesn't do it in their own country. I mean, into the States they haven't caught up with this yet, but how about shoes? Are they still dealing with that? Thank you. The U.S. finally stopped. So yay. And it never made sense to me if one person can bring a tenth of a liter, can't 10 people traveling together each bring a tenth to make one? I mean, but I can't figure this stuff out anymore. I gave up on it. Anyway, here's a map of the airport, and you can sort of there you go. You can sort of see where different terminals are. Maybe that's somewhat helpful. They aren't connected, unfortunately. Well, every bit of information we get, I thank you all for your good advice. And anybody going from Gatwick? Yeah, okay, well, here we go. That looks simpler. Yeah. I know people are using Manchester, aren't they, for some of the London flights now and things, and much further out. They just can't keep. They had an early computer program that looked at putting in a third airport, and they put in all the information except one little detail, and the computer program, this is about 20 years ago, came back and said, this is a nice open area, put it here. Well, it was the Thames River. Oops. Yeah. Anyway, what you got here is 2 terminals, and they are more together. So it's much easier to work with. Anybody have advice on Gatwick? That sounds better. Yeah. So there you go. Okay, going to London for the day, certainly possible. My wife and I did it on a trip a while back. You need a train, obviously, to do that. And again, of course, watching time is, but it can be a nice trip in there and walk around. And there's quite a bit else to see around here if you're not generally familiar with the area. It's Heathrow, London, but they're a little bit north in the corner there. They're off into sort of the northwest more. I probably should have marked them in there, but I was thinking about just going back to, no? Did I make a mistake? Where?
Gatwick's at 6 o'clock.
Okay.
Heathrow's at 9 o'clock.
Okay, I stand corrected. I stand corrected. Okay, so they're a little bit outside there then too. There is trains from London to them, isn't there? Yeah. Okay, good. I'm glad you caught that. My mistake. But okay, great. So, I flipped it. Okay. If you don't have that time and you're interested in naval history, Portsmouth is not that far away. Get there an hour by train, just again, and there's so much to see. It almost, it's almost one day there isn't enough. Who spent a lot of time in Portsmouth? Yeah, and how much? 2-3 days to really see everything? You have to go across the river to see the submarines and all this. Yeah, it's huge. So the Victory is, of course, the showstopper. As they have a marker there where Nelson died, and it's right now it's got scaffolding all over it because after 250 years it needs a little work in the ocean, but it's very much still open. The Warrior was a much later Victorian ship, which don't believe it has any battles, but it's just the fact it showed what the Royal Navy could do was enough to keep things in line. And there's a lot more. It's amazing how much there is. Anybody go to Antigua and see the huge dock places there where you can see the big stones where they can take these sailing ships, they'll pull them up and they'll tip them over and scour the bottoms. I mean, that's impressive. It's the kind of thing you read about in the Hornblower book. The Nelson dockyards, when Nelson was a minor officer at the time, but they named it later, called it his. But yeah, they worked. So Isle of Wight, I looked at it today, I said, you just can't do this properly in a day, but give the ship sailing. But there are direct ferries back and forth fairly often. It's not far. And there's a high-speed one which ties in with that steam railway. So they have a fun little train you can take on it as well. And there's some old forts and so on, an abbey and ruins. And the Osborne House, parts of that are open. And that belonged to the royal family. Queen Victoria liked it. She died when she was there. She was 82. And the upper apartment is still belongs to the royal family and is off limits, but the lower parts are open. Interesting thing is she insisted it be given to her children. And Edward VII didn't want it. Nobody else wanted it. So they said, we'll give it to the state as a museum. But they had to put an act of parliament in to break Victoria's will to do that. Yeah. And Salisbury, I was just talking with someone a few minutes ago about that. It is a nice medieval city. Got a lovely cathedral. It's just fun to go in there, but everybody thinks, well, Salisbury Plain, and that's where, yeah. Stonehenge. Thing is, it's about 9 miles, 15K away from there. It's beyond Salisbury. So to get there, there are buses and there are short tours to go to it. You have to plan for that. But it's not very walkable. First time I went there as a teenager, I hitchhiked, but that's probably not what people want to do today from Salisbury. But anyways, there, unfortunately, you can't go up to the stones anymore, I'm sorry to say, except maybe they open at Midsummer's, isn't it? Or something. You can't get in for that. And then they open it up and you go in there. Good job. Yeah. Good. But the stones, the Druids did not do them. But okay. Anyway, pretty impressive. Good for you. I'm glad it's open for that. Well worth it. Actually reminded me when I saw them, it reminded me a little bit of going to Cape Canaveral, kind of a sense of humanity, reaching up sort of for the stars. Okay, well, just to wrap up, this is our trip right off the ads, and it's been a lot of fun. I'm sorry we missed one stop we all know about, but I think they did what they could with everything else. And it's got, my mother always said there's 3 parts to a trip. It's before you go, the excitement, enjoying it when you're on it, and then the good memories afterwards. And it's been really fun with everybody here, and I hope everybody's enjoyed this as much as I have. And we all keep doing what we like to do best, keep traveling. Thank you.